Hello and welcome to my page here. Not sure how you found me, but here you are and here I am. I've contemplated a lot about whether or not I should post anything on this, but Instagram and stuff like that, it's with 60 seconds you can't really say very much. As far as what I'd like to talk about is alchemy and how do we understand it? How do we begin to understand it? How do we even fathom what they're talking about in a way that is logical and makes sense? And is that even possible? Is it a fairy tale? Is it a pipe dream? What is it about this thing that has had some of the greatest minds known in history have all been involved in some way with alchemy? And it's gone back for thousands and thousands of years, like even early Egypt, 4000 BC, they were interpreting ancient texts into their common language at the time concerning the subject. And here we are today, 6,000 years later, and books are still being written about it. People are still talking about it, and what really is going on? Like could there have been a race of people that existed long ago before we can even fathom, that had a science that was well advanced beyond our own? In trying to at least get a grasp on what was going on, just began reading books on the subject, all different books. And some of the books would claim one thing, and then other books would claim another thing. Some writers think it's complete BS. Other writers spend their whole lifetimes searching after it, and it just goes on and on and on. And then my friend Isis told me that I needed to read this book called Mystery of the Cathedrals. And it took a year and a half for me to actually read it from the first time I told her that I would. And she asked me every couple months, "Caleb, have you read that book yet?" "No, I haven't read that book yet." "Caleb, have you read that book yet?" And finally, out of embarrassment, because I hadn't read it, I downloaded the audiobook and I put it on while I was working. And I thought it was going to be a book about churches. Cathedral Notre Dame, there's a lot of history there and everything. It's all interesting. But it wasn't at all like I was thinking it was going to be at all. He starts talking about alchemy, and he starts talking about ancient sciences, and he telling stories about people turning lead into silver and gold and stuff. And I'm a gold miner, so that perked my ears up, of course. And as he walks you through the Cathedral Notre Dame and describes all the different plates carved into the walls through every part of the church and the building itself, and even the grounds that it's laid out on, in the fashion it's laid out in, is all hieroglyphical language. And it's like, pardon me, long day. It's a book of riddles, essentially. And for every hieroglyph, you get a whole bunch of riddles. And then he goes through, he walks you through all the hieroglyphs in order, and then he walks you through other ones on different buildings. And by the time you're done reading the book, you're thinking, man alive, this is unbelievable. Like, if this is really real, like, is that actually possible? And so where would you begin? Where do you even start if you want to try and figure all that out? Pardon me. The Mystery of the Cathedrals by Fulcanelli, I would consider to be a primer to understanding the language used by the people who wrote this down. And they were actually quite a few people that wrote it down, and there's also quite a few people that said they wrote it down that were completely charlatans, and they were just selling books on the subject. And there's a lot of those out there, so it's like what they call the puffers. And even here on YouTube, there's a lot of puffers. And the funny thing is they'll talk and talk and talk about the subject, but as soon as you mention the possibility of applying it to the natural world and not just psychology or the mental, the inner being of the man, it is applicable in that way, but it being able to be applied in that way does not negate its ability to be applied in all the other ways they say it can be. And so few people actually believe that it's just ridiculous, like, to try and have a conversation with somebody about it, really, because it's like telling them that the earth is flat. They're just gonna probably roll their eyes and walk away most of the time. But how could there be a science like this that has attracted the greatest minds of the world for hundreds, if not thousands of years? How could there not be some truth hidden in there waiting to be rediscovered again? And how do we find that truth? Where do we start digging? Like, as a gold miner, when you're looking for a gold-rich area, you first learn to read the symptoms of the ground. And then you start to get an idea of where you can look that might actually be worth looking. And so, in the great mire of books on alchemy, the first challenge becomes finding authors who are being honest with you and weeding out which ones are charlatans. There was this one book I read, it's called the Book of Aquarius, and I warn you against that book. If you follow their instructions, you'll be making white and red phosphorus. And if you eat white and red phosphorus, that will be the end of your work. You will be dead. And so the Book of Aquarius, and he starts out the book telling you that he's going to give you in plain language how to make the stone. And then he describes the operation that was used to discover phosphorus. This is how phosphorus was discovered. And so he goes on and on and on, telling you all the great benefits to this work that he's doing. And then he unveils the inner truth, and it was very disappointing, very, very disappointing. But there are real seekers out there, and there are writers of truth, and so weeding through, for me, what opened the door for me in that area was Fulcanelli. Because he takes some of the veil off the allegory, and he puts it into riddle form. And a game of riddles, now that's fun. You know, you go through the book and you read the riddles. What I did is I essentially did an alchemical process on the book. I broke it down. I separated into sections. I separated out the sections within the sections that related to each particular glyph. And then that way you can look at the riddles and you can look at the glyph and you can contemplate them as one. But you also have to take everything in context, so it's important that everything is done in order. And in doing it that way, and also with the approach of, and a lot of these authors, some of these writers, like Flamel, his book on the hieroglyphical figures, somebody put an introductory in the first page. Before you read all Flamel's words, there's a page somebody put in there since he wrote it, and it says, you know, basically it's all allegorical. It doesn't apply to the natural world. It applies to, you know, spiritual growth and such. And it is true that it applies to spiritual growth and inner being and mental health and everything else, but that does not negate its application to the natural world. Because what you're really doing, essentially, when you peek into the process, is you're looking through the ground down into the earth, and you're seeing what's happening inside of the earth where the plates conjoin and the lava is born under the pressure, and the plate that used to be ocean floor is being poured into the lava, and that salt, that whole plate is just mountains of salt are being distilled, and the salt already contains minerals, and so you have all of the elements being delivered in the forms of salt down into this subjunction zone from what used to be an ocean floor. And then pressure and heat separates those elements, and so you get all these gases, and you get all these moistures, and you get all these pools of different kinds of solutions. As you come closer and closer to the surface, then the temperatures change by degrees as you get further and further from the subjunction zones. And so in these areas, they call the Ring of Fire, the one around the Pacific plate, but there's around each plate there's this crack zone, and it goes all the way down into the belly of the earth. And in those areas, as the gases and all of the elements become separated by the heat and the pressures, then you have the places where elements are born in those zones. And there's a particular zone where the temperature ranges between 50 Celsius and 400 Celsius, and it fluctuates back and forth in that range. And that particular range is where the chemical solution methods are born. Down further, it's in the molten lava. It's what's called the dry methods, because it's dry. It's dealing with dry reactions. They're in extreme heat, in the 1100 degree range or more. And so if you could see inside these pools, you have water being added to them, you have salts being added to them. Some of them are full of sulfuric acid, and some of them are filled with, you know, salt-based solutions, and all of the elements are present in there, and they're being acted upon by essentially the essence of life itself, the seed of nature. And as they do, they go through cyclical processes of growth, and and one element is developed and matured and built upon, and becomes a new element over enough time. And each cycle is the length of the life of a volcano, basically. And because a volcano starts out under pressure, it goes through the whole cycle, and then eventually it loses its pressure and it erupts. And then the dehydration happens. Different elements are born. So in learning this process, that was a long rabbit trail, the key point is to understand how solutions and elements and chemicals were known in the ancient times. 6,000 years ago, nitric acid wouldn't have been called nitric acid, and sulfuric acid wouldn't have been called sulfuric acid. And what would they have called those things? Hydrochloric acid, or like any of these things used in chemistry today. Like, they didn't have these chemical names, but these substances existed. And the way that they saw the world was in storybook allegory form already, and so it was natural for them to look at the characteristics of the qualities and behavior of the substance and embody it into a character that embodied those characteristics, that brought those characteristics to life. And so you have one substance that is known as the mother, and the mother is the substance that all the other substances are born out of. But it has three forms, because you have the mother, the maiden, and the crone. And so the first substance has three forms. The first substance is the least spoken about of all the substances of the work. Most alchemists just leave it out altogether. They don't talk about its process, because that's the initial key. And if you have that key, then you can figure out everything else. And the way that they designed the allegories. But Fulcanelli does a really good job of unveiling an understanding of where they're coming from with these substances, and how they describe them and how they embody them into these characters. And not only do the chemicals are embodied as spirits or demons, but the matter itself, the subject that you're working on, is also going through many transformations. And so these transformations are conjunctions of different elements. And so you have the different elements to begin with, and they're each embodied by a particular bird or creature or demon or animal. And then you have the subject, which is usually symbolized by a bird, or a man, sometimes a woman. They're not consistent, as consistent as there are different alchemists. But it's... So when you join the salt and the sulfur, then you'll take the head off the creature that was the salt and you put it onto the body of the creature that was the sulfur. And then if you dissolve it, then you give it wings. If it was crystallized, then you take away its wings and give it feet or claws. And so you have all these different allegorical conjunctions, these pictures of things joined together in strange ways. You have the griffin, you have the phoenix, you have the sphinx, and all these other creatures that are all, they're depictions of chemical compounds. Some of them are chemical solutions. Some of them are depictions of the work itself. Like as you build, you take this element, you stick something else to it, and well, now it started off as a lion, and then you added an eagle's head to it, and then you gave it the ass of a bull. You know what I mean? And like, and so these unions of male and female, essentially the process as you walk through it, like when they first start walking you through it, they're walking you through how to make the ingredients, and then they start walking you through how to make the stone. And each step along the way is a mirror. As you're making the ingredients, the process used to make the ingredients is a mirror of the process used to make the stone. They reflect each other, and except the difference being the colors show up in the opposite. Like when you're making the ingredients, the blue shows up first. When you're making the stone, the blue shows up last. And so the making of the ingredients and the ingredients themselves are called the mirror of the work. So the first goal is to understand the mirror, and it's, you know, an allegory of taking a look at yourself and doing the process on yourself internally. You have to go through you yourself have to go through the process as you learn the process in order to be successful, according to the alchemists that seem to have an idea of what they were talking about. This journey is one that very few people even believe is possible. And so that eliminates the vast majority of people from even trying. And then of the people that do think it's possible, even fewer of those people would actually try it or have the time. You know, everybody's got a life they're trying to live, and who has time for alchemy, right? And if you don't understand where to start to begin with, that's the hardest part, because you could have the desire to try, but if you don't have a roadmap to the land that you're going to be traversing, then it's really easy to get lost. Fulcanelli does a really, really good job walking you through, because he does it in order. As he walks you through the hieroglyphs, he does it in order, and so if you follow his pattern, you're going to be doing the process in the right order. A lot of the other guys are kind of back and forth. There's not as much order to it. Fulcanelli is specifically trying to relay the actual process itself. And so he gives you, like, he's talking to a different group of people in his book. He's not he's not embellishing it into a story tape, you know, as much as other ones who aren't actually trying to give you the recipe. Fulcanelli expects you to be reading the book and be trying things out in your lab as you read it so that you can understand what he's talking about. And until you see in your vessel what he's talking about, then you won't understand the next thing for sure, because everything builds off of everything, you know, and that's just kind of the way the whole process goes. It's like a hallway of doors. First, you walk up to the building and there's a big door in the front, and you look at it and you're like, whoa, okay. You get through the door, and then that door opens to a foyer which has another door in front of you that's closed, and then you open that door, and that door opens to a hallway which has another door at the other end, and you just keep opening these doors one after another. But you can't make it to the next door until you get through the door that's in front of you. And the first step is understanding that at the time that these things were written, there was no chemical name for things. Solvents and chemicals were called spirits. And so they were given names according to their behaviors. And so spirits that had to be distilled and condensed in order to be born were most often depicted as birds. And you would usually find the bird near the element that the substance comes from, that they're made from. And so the bird and the tree is a pretty major allegory throughout alchemical writings for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Solomon. It's the writings of Solomon, all of the chemicals are known by the names of demons. And so you have to meet the head demon in order to have him tell you which one of his cronies are the right guy to be working with to find the next step. And then that guy leads you to another demon who guards a bird in a tree. And that bird in a tree carries a worm. And then the worm can eat rocks. And so they use the worm to cut the blocks to make the temple. But he didn't really go see a demon to find a worm. He was using a spirit, a chemical solution, to cut the stones. And those kinds of stones can be cut with an acidic solution, because the temple couldn't be built with tools, right? The blocks had to be cut without iron tools. It was a major key point. So how do you cut giant blocks of stone without tools? Well, you use a worm that's caught by a bird in a tree that's guarded by a demon who's, guarded by 2 or 3 other demons from hell. And when in reality, that's just how they would have described a chemical solution capable of dissolving stone 4,000 BC. They just didn't have words like we do now for solvents and, the alkaloids. It's just a different time in history. People had different names for things, but as they say, a rose by any other name is just as sweet, and an acid by any other name burns just as bad. And so if you can wade through the allegories and understand they're talking about a chemical process that happens in the earth, in the volcano. And so you think about what What chemicals are present in a volcano? Well, you have sulfur is a pretty big one that's present in volcanoes. You know, you got all the solvents. You have, you know, and you even have, there's something inside the volcano that allows these elements to mature. And it's about a repetitive, cyclic cycle of development. It doesn't happen all at once. Rarely does it happen all at once, I think. And it takes a long time before it gets to that point. And so the journey is in choosing good teachers to begin with. That's going to be a key point in the journey that helps you along the way. And people like Fulcanelli, Flamel, Count of Saint Germain, their writings are going to be more beneficial. And as you begin to understand their writings, then you'll be able to see through the charlatans more easily. Because once you begin to see through and understand the language used, then when you read somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about but thinks they do, it becomes more obvious. Some authors, so far I haven't read an author that I haven't learned something from. Even if they were completely full of crap, you're always able to glean something, even if it's what not to do, right? But there's been a small handful of authors that have actually been beneficial to understanding what they're talking about. What does it mean when they give the dragon wings and feet, you know? And what does it mean when there's doves and dogs everywhere, and like, what's going on with all these repeated unions? And then you got Mercury like getting in the middle of everything. And for me, I love figuring things out, understanding how things work. What does it mean? What are they really talking about? Is it really possible to actually understand what they were doing? Is that completely lost, or is it still salvageable? You know, is there a way to rediscover the real science behind the alchemy? And if there is, how do you go about doing that? There's very, very, very few practitioners, as far as I can find. But being the fact that they are practitioners would mean that they're probably not going to be out telling everybody much either. But in the off chance that there are a few people out there who are truly wanting to understand, and that they have the right character, you know, life goals, like, it's like a Pandora's box. It could be full of all kinds of good things, or it could be full of all kinds of bad things, depending on who opens it. So, you know, if somebody's not supposed to have this, they'll be hindered. No matter how much they try, no matter how hard they seek, they'll never finish the work. And the authors, they all say the best way to learn is having a teacher telling you to learn in person, to be but how do you find somebody like that, right? I'm putting down, hey, by the way, all those people that know how to make gold, if you don't mind me sitting in so I can learn, right? Good luck with that. And then they say it is possible to figure it out yourself through divine inspiration, and that it doesn't happen very often, but it is possible, right? And so if it is possible, why not try at least anyways, I know there's going to be a million people that think it's all bullshit and could care less about any of them, and that's fine, that's okay. You'll never make gold, and you're okay with that, and I'm okay with that too, but I'm not going to say that it's not possible until I've tried it. And so the journey goes on, how do you find your way through the labyrinth? And the best way to find your way through the labyrinth is to listen to the writings of the people that have walked the path ahead of you. And there's actually quite a few. A lot of them they have books that are anonymously written, and the ones that aren't anonymously written use pseudonyms, so they're never really known. You don't know whose book it is. Oh, forgive me. Alchemists never sleep, so I'm up night and day. The journey through the labyrinth will test you to the utmost ends of your being, like in every way possible, spiritually, physically, emotionally. If you really are planning on taking this journey, then prepare to be tested in every way possible along the way. And not only physically and all that, but people are gonna laugh at you. People that think they know that they're talking about, the puffers, especially if they think they know what they're talking about in the subject, they are gonna laugh. And it's better than being burnt at the stake, I say. It wasn't very long ago that they would have burned you at the stake. So if they're gonna laugh now, I think I can handle that, And if you're willing to put up with the ridicule, then I think it's a journey that's worth embarking upon. The Mystery of the Cathedrals by Fulcanelli is where I started with this. And then I started reading every book on alchemy I could find. And now my favorite authors on the subject are Fulcanelli, Flamel, Saint Germain, top three. Without them, I wouldn't have a clue. And so my recommendation would be to start with Mystery of the Cathedrals, because it's like a primer for understanding the language of the birds. And once you understand the language of the birds, the allegorical way of speaking used by the ancient peoples, then you'll be able to pick up any alchemical text and understand it if it's a real book written by a real alchemist. The charlatans, they use a lot of fancy words and they don't tell you anything. Or if they do tell you something like that other book, man, they're gonna teach you how to make a poison and kill you with it. And those authors just disappear. because they finally finish their work and they try it and they're gone. But I don't know if anybody will ever see this post or video, and I thought I'd just throw it out there to see who might be interested. And what I would really like would be to start like a practitioner's corner. Like in the old days, they used to have like a guild of practitioners that would gather once a month or once a week or once a year or every 20 years and confer on their findings and you know, throw some ideas back and forth and kind of start to network people who are like-minded and interested in physically, like I'm talking about practitioners as far as like metallurgical alchemy. We're talking about having a lab and learning the art of mimicking nature and doing it using texts that were written hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, or all, you know, both, all of the texts. It seems like different authors revealed different parts, and so in order to have the whole picture, you have to have read all of the authors, and then you'll have every different aspect of the science. You'll never, like the closest to finding it all in one is Fulcanelli. But if you only use Fulcanelli, then there's going to be a few points that you're going to struggle with for many years before you figure it out, which is where Count Saint Germain and Flamel come in, and some other more obscure authors that are unnamed. The journey is long, but it's worth it. And for those of you that are interested in maybe, I don't know, trying to figure it out, or at least seeing if it can go anywhere, I hope you enjoy this video and may you be blessed